So, Smart Cities, Doug McCullough, take it away.
Good afternoon. We have the distinction of going after lunch. It's a very coveted time frame there. So I have a wonderful panel here, and I'm just going to mention your names. I'm going to ask you to just introduce yourself and your organization. We have E.B. Holst. This is also a test in my pronunciation. I'm going to turn it around here, sorry. E.B. Holst. We have Mark Bell. We have Chris Berry, and we have Mark Dilsaver, and I am Doug McCullough, and I will go first to pace us out. I am the executive director of the Beta District. It is a council of governments made up of the 33 Smart Mobility Corridor. 33 is a highway in central Ohio area, has to do with connected and autonomous vehicles, advanced air mobility, anything having to do with smart mobility is the Beta District. It's a small leap from smart city to smart mobility, and previous to that I was the CIO of the city of Dublin, and I probably still have the distinction of being one of the only cities that experimented with a blockchain ID, digital ID. I haven't heard anybody else in Ohio do it yet as a city. With that, we'll go right down the line. Evie.
Thank you, Doug. First, Chris, you got to get pictures or I get in trouble. Okay. My name is E.B. Holst, and I'm with the Cleveland Water Alliance, and I have a long background in technology back in the olden days before the internet. I was lucky enough to help, kind of build that out on the West Coast. And what I do today at the Cleveland Water Alliance is really focused on building out Lake Erie as the smartest, most digitally connected freshwater body in the world. So Cleveland Water Alliance, we built out about 7,700 square miles of telemetry over the Lake Erie Basin, and we deploy a couple hundred devices, IoT devices, every year. We serve up data from those devices to a range of stakeholders, specifically with a focus these days on utilities being able to use some of that data to make sure our drinking water is safe. And we're learning a lot. We also leverage all of this infrastructure to serve as a test bed. So we host IoT-related companies from around the world that come to Cleveland specifically and deploy their devices inside of our connected test bed here in the Lake Erie Basin.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Bell. I work for the Adjutant General's Department of the State of Ohio. You know what that is? Think Ohio National Guard. I'm the Cybersecurity Outreach Coordinator. I coordinate our efforts across other state agencies, academia, industry, all over the state. We have created the Ohio Cyber Collaboration Committee, which organizes those lines of efforts. We built the Ohio Cyber Range. Cleveland State is a participant in that as a regional program center. We created the Ohio Cyber Reserve, which are civilian folks organized under agency who reach out and do a lot of volunteer work in helping local governments and critical infrastructure be safer. And we also most recently created the Ohio Persistent Cyber Improvement Program, which is a free training, mentoring, development program for local governments to help them meet them where they are and move to the right through their maturity. Glad to be here with you today.
Chris Berry, CEO, founder of eShell Resources. We're an embedded solutions provider in the Central Ohio area. We primarily focus on V2X, heavy connected vehicle, connected city, smart city, small devices, and IoT, with an emphasis on some security and software development. We take you all the way up from schematic to software development and firmware. And I'm excited to be able to be able to.
Good afternoon, Mark Dilsaver, City of Dublin. I'm the Transportation Program Manager, which means that I oversee our day-to-day traffic signal operations. So most people call me when the traffic signals don't work. But I also oversee our smart mobility initiatives from development, visioning, development, and deployment and management after post-deployment. We've been very heavily involved with the Beta District. Obviously, we're a key partner there. And I've been involved with the Smart Mobility Corridor, the 33 Smart Mobility Corridor from the beginning. So it's been very interesting to see the involvement or the evolution of where we were before we had the Smart Mobility Corridor to the breadth of technologies that we have deployed now in the region.
So there's been an amazing set of information this morning in talking about various settings and contexts for a lot of things. I think we got nice and scared during the panels here. Hopefully we can scare you a little bit as well. But when we think about smart cities, what came into my mind is one of the only contexts that has public oversight. And so in a corporate environment and other environments, it's not so much public, and I think that's a big deal. So smart city could be a smart state, smart county, but that happens. We have elected officials who are a big part of making decisions and approving of different actions that happen in a smart city. And given that context, first of all, I'd love for you to validate, each of you, what I'm saying about public oversight is that one of the things that makes a smart city different in an IoT context. And what tactics have worked in obtaining internal buy-in from city leadership or stakeholders for smart city initiatives? I'm going to start with Mark Dilson.
Yeah, there we go. There's a delay, I forgot. That's a great question. And so, yeah, I think that tactics that have worked to get that buy-in or that, from leadership, council, administration, is really just proving the value to the residents. So that's our first and foremost, component or function is to provide value to our residents. And so showing that a smart city solution, smart mobility solution can provide value, whether that's in my world, that's transportation, right? So that means that I can make a roadway network safer, or I can make a specific intersection safer. That's a key component, but being able to prove that with the data, right? We all have just observational components that we see, but being able to have the data to back that up is a very critical component to get the buy-in.
And Chris, you are not a public entity, but you're often advising them and trying to help public entities. I do use that interchangeably, cities and public entities. Can you give your perspective on that?
Yeah, I see a lot of cities be really successful with that ROI, that initial ROI, is pick off low-hanging fruit. Like what is out there that we can do now that has a small, easy lift? That gets a lot of buy-in, not only from municipalities, but from other government agencies where, well, let's be real, that's where the funding comes in to the bigger projects to be taken care of. So look at that, like a smart water device or, some smart lighting. Maybe simple or whatever, but do that proof of concept because you work with a local agency, shop local when you look at these kind of projects, to do that easy lift, to then take that out there and do a road show, white paper it. Do events like this, get on stage and talk about the effort and what you did and how you were successful. I found that goes a long way when they try to do some bigger projects to get the funding to secure the smart roads, the big smart corridors and things like that.
And Mark, you serve public entities as well. Do you have the same issues with buy-in and helping people who may be at a rudimentary level of technical understanding advance pretty fast and have an appreciation for what's coming and what we need to do to prepare for it?
Sure. Well, in Ohio, we have almost 4,000 local governments. Like a lot of Midwestern states, we love local government. It's great, close to the people and all that. The challenge is that across that 4,000 entities, there's a wide variety of size, budgets, and expertise. And so the difference between, a city as big as Cleveland and a small village or a small township is huge, both in the budgets that they have and their ability to manage those things. So I'm looking at this from a cybersecurity perspective, and let me just say up front, I'm not anti-IoT, I'm not even IoT skeptical, but I am IoT cautious because although IoT can do a lot of really amazing things, it opens up a lot of additional risks that we have to think about. And so when you're looking at those smaller governmental entities, do they have the capability to manage the risk? And so one of the things that we're trying to do at the statewide level is to provide those resources and expertise to help particularly smaller entities manage the potential risks of IoT so that they can then take advantage of the benefits that come from it.
And Evie, I think you and I probably share a characteristic, blossoming and popping up all over the world now, our corridors, districts, hubs, zones, we're all marketing this space. And while I'm doing it on a corridor with, which is a highway, you're doing it with water here in this area. And we're both trying to attract innovators to come in and show something that we couldn't do ourselves and become attracted to our area and those kinds of things. Do I have that right in what you're trying to do?
Yeah, so, one of the things about what Cleveland Water Alliance is doing, Smart Cities has been evolving for several years now, and Smart Water, it's much newer, it's a much younger kind of area to work in. And so, one of the things that we're able to do as a nonprofit is to cover a footprint that may span multiple municipalities, whether they're large or small. And by doing that, that enables us to, to make things that accessible to smaller municipalities that wouldn't otherwise be accessible at all. So we're able to bring some scale to the question. The other thing that we've also been finding is that, for the most part, when the work that we're doing in the IoT space is really about getting the data. It's not necessarily about automating something like a traffic light. But when we talk about it with those potential public stakeholders, it's very abstract to them. So what we find is, we essentially have to do the build it and they will come kind of a thing. We have to provide that data to them to make it a tangible value proposition where they start to understand how, if I know that the dissolved oxygen levels are dropping, I have to swap out my entire staff. I have to swap out the chemicals I'm using to treat the water. And if I know, 6 hours in advance, whereas before I didn't know until that water was already inside the plant, suddenly they start to get it and they start to understand, like, can you do this also? Can you also do this? And then that brings in those opportunities to invite innovators to come help do some solutions and problem solving.
And perhaps organize it as well, which I enjoy doing. And sticking with you, and you just said about, smart cities kind of evolving, and it has, and that's one of the reasons why I've begun using language like public entity and community. I think we're going to find that this technology is going to push us into new definitions of what our city actually is. There was a definition 10 years ago or 15 years ago. It doesn't apply in a place where data is ubiquitous and always in front of us, and we're measured and those things. And I think we just need new language and to keep thinking about that. So let's talk about AI. I'm going to stick with you and go down the road here. As we continue iterating with AI, what might be the next evolution of IoT and edge computing look like? And we did hear earlier from some other panels talking about that, but I'd like our perspective from the city's concept.
So this is an interesting time actually to ask that question, because with the changes we're seeing out of Washington, D.C., we're also seeing federal agencies that have historically provided data may not be in a position to do that going forward over the coming months and years. And in the water space, there are two specific areas that have been, that are ripe for AI support. And they're essentially looking at forecasting. So, we all know about the HABs, the harmful algal bloom that happened in 2014 in Toledo. It was a huge deal. I mean, that was almost 500,000 people that were without water for 4 or 5 days, and there are still people that live in the Toledo area that don't trust the water to this day. They still won't drink the water. Toledo has really dealt with that issue, I mean, amazingly well, and there was also a NOAA funded project to provide algorithms that could predict harmful algal blooms. Similarly for hypoxic events that nobody in this room needs to know about, but those have really big impacts on the safety and public health of all of us. And those will no longer be available if some of these federal resources change. So this is a really important time to bring in AI into the picture and to kind of look at what are the data sources. It's a whole new game when you have real-time data, where you can also see data across a footprint, like we see in the Lake Erie Basin. I mean, water has no political boundaries, so you're going to see things move across water from one city, impacted to another. And being able to see some of those trends coming and incorporate things like, weather and, currents and so forth is going to be really important in terms of how we are equipping ourselves using AI to inform some of our resilience and our ability to react to changing conditions.
Mark, I'm going to call you IoT vigilant. I think you said skeptical or something like that, but cautious. How can we address valid concerns around IoT while still advocating for innovation? There has to be a balance there.
Sure. Well, first of all, again, I'm not anti-IoT. I just am interested in making sure that, one of the earlier panels was talking about, baking security in from the very beginning, but understanding what the risks are. If you have thousands of new additional connections to the internet that are part of your network, that means you have thousands of new points of potential entry for a bad actor. That can be overcome, but only if it's done intentionally and thoughtfully from the very, very beginning. So I think, number one, we have to, there's a concept in cybersecurity I didn't hear anyone talk about earlier today, so I'll get to say at least one new thing that you haven't heard already. And that is this concept of what we call zero trust, right? You have to validate and verify every component of your network, every sensor, everything that you purchase and put together to make sure that it actually can be trusted. And the challenge is that a lot of IoT things, frankly, aren't very expensive. I know earlier we were talking about IoT and manufacturing, and that's probably not an issue there, but when you start talking about consumer products and sensors, a lot of those are very inexpensive. A lot of them are made in places that aren't friends of the United States. So how do you know that those devices can be trusted, that they can do what you want them to do? And there's different pieces of this. So you have controls, and then you have diagnostic stuff. But even the diagnostic elements can be a threat if they're giving you bad data. So if I think something is a certain way, and we use the water analogy, right? So if I think my water is a certain way and I need it to be a different way, and I'm going to add additional chemicals or a different level of chemicals based on that sensor. If the sensor is giving me bad data and I don't have a way to determine that data is bad, I will take an action that's actually harmful when I think it's helpful. And so, again, IoT has many, many great things it can do for us across a whole host of places, whether it be IoT in the home, IoT in the city, IoT in manufacturing. But if we can't trust it, if we don't know that it's giving us good data, and we don't know that it's going to do what we tell it to do, that can be an issue. And the last piece of this, and we haven't really talked about privacy yet, and privacy and cybersecurity are different, but they're related. The more data that we're collecting through sensors, and if it's a smart city, we've got a sensor on every light pole. That's a lot of data that's coming in. And with the use of these large language models and large data analytics through AI, that data can be harvested and sussed out to figure out who you are, where you are, what you're doing. And so as we build these large sensor networks, we have to think about privacy, who has access to it, what can be done with it, and how do we protect the privacy of our citizens.
Yeah, the flip side of that coin, there's new data, new devices coming in that is shareable. As an Ohioan, as a member of a Great Lakes state, there's some excitement. There are people who may want to get involved with data that weren't there before. So there's this positive value add that comes from some of this stuff becoming available. But Chris, going over to you, there is a cost to not doing smart city infrastructure and development and those things. Socially, for our community, there is a cost, and no matter what, Can you speak to that cost and you know, what concerns you may have with it?
Yeah, so some of the concerns I have is not really, Smart City has a cost itself, right? But for me, the cost is not implementing. So if you look at that from a holistic standpoint, you're okay with being inefficient to a certain standpoint where you're not implementing smart city devices or making those connections viable and available. So not implementing to me is one of the biggest fears because I feel like you're going to be left behind in some municipalities and you're going to be using old and legacy systems that could, previous conversation we had, open you up to attacks or to threats or just to be not really efficient. So I look at the cost to me as not implementing as opposed to the cost of buying the devices or implementing.
Mark, we often have to prioritize different investments, different architectures, different decisions. Sometimes they are in conflict with each other or in competition with each other. Sometimes both are important. They can both be, or multiples can be life-saving. There's those kinds of prioritization that needs to happen. From a city's perspective, what's the justification or logical framework for prioritizing certain smart city technologies over others, if any?
Yeah, so I would say the largest justification that we have, again, our whole purpose that we exist for as a city is to serve our residents. So part of that is utilizing the tax dollars in the best, most efficient way possible and to get our biggest bang for our buck. So we look for the deployments and the technologies that can do both, that can serve our residents and provide the most value. What we've been successful with in Dublin and in the Beta District as a whole is partnering with different technology providers to test and deploy their technologies in the real world, right? So I like to say that, you know, testing in a lab is very, very important, but to put it on the street and test it in the real world is very critical as well. And so we partner with a lot of technology providers to deploy their technology on our roadways, in our streets, and proof those out and see where things maybe fail. So in doing that though, we get a lot of value because there's a cost share that happens. And so we're able to be the recipient of the benefits of that technology, as well as with a minimal level of investment, right? So for instance, we have a deployment right now of a dynamic traffic signal system in 22 of our 48 signalized intersections. We had a very, very low cost of cost share with that, and our vendor has much more significant, you know, skin in the game, if you will. And so we get a huge benefit out of that. Our residents are seeing a huge benefit out of that deployment with minimal cost from the city.
So we've got a rather short panel today, so I've got a couple of wrap-up questions. Not too short of an answer, but not necessarily too long of one. Just to talk about, let's talk about Ohio again, let's talk about the region. Can each of you, I'll start with you, Mark, talk about how we are involved in the local or regional IoT landscape?
Well, again, the city of Dublin is heavily invested in you know, smart cities technologies, smart mobilities technologies. Specifically in my sphere of transportation, we are always looking for the next cutting edge technology that can help make our system more efficient and safer. And actually that's in reverse order, more safe and more efficient, because safety is paramount in the transportation network. And so we are heavily invested in IoT initiatives, and we don't foresee us cutting back anytime soon.
Chris, the regional IoT landscape.
Yeah, where's the delay? Yeah, there you go. Yeah, we're really invested into the IoT landscape when it comes to connected vehicles. So V2X, what's that mean? Vehicle to interface. So how vehicles are talking to smart cities, how they're connected to those V2P. That's vehicle to pedestrian. How can we be smart where we can alert people who are in certain traffic areas that, hey, there's an accident, avoid this area. That's the area that we're really leaning into, because part of what the Route 33 corridor that Doug and also the city of Dublin and other municipalities are championing, we're really involved in making that successful because it's coming. Autonomous vehicles are coming, whether we like it or not. So to be prepared for that, I think we're really leaning into that space to make sure, again, with the safety and the efficiencies that these areas are going to need to provide.
Mark, the regional IoT landscape.
Sure. So from our perspective, working across the state line, what we're trying to do is to provide training, education, support for our local governments so that they have the ability to do these things safely. And again, I don't want to, oh, Mark, he's against IoT. No, I'm all for IT. But there are some risks. All of us probably drove to get here today. I know I did, right? Driving's dangerous. But I would never give up my car. So what we do is we come up with ways to make that safer. We have seat belts, we have airbags, we have crumple zones, we have backup cameras, we have lane avoidance, all of those technical things that we put in